Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of Your Money, Your Life, the Black Enterprise Conversation Series, where we talk about all aspects of financial wellness. Because as you know, the Black Enterprise motto is wealth for life. My guest today knows that motto well because he is a Black Enterprise alum. But beyond that, he's a consummate sales professional, entrepreneur, multi-book best-selling author, and my good friend, Jason Murray, and he has a new book out called The 7 Mindsets of Successfully Transitioning from Employee to Entrepreneur. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you, Alfred. Thank you for the invitation to come and have this conversation. As you know, we have been good friends for a long, long time, and just looking forward to a great conversation today.
Yeah, this conversation is going to be like falling out of bed because you and I have these conversations all the time as we both go on our respective journeys. And you know, guys, what we're really going to be focusing on for this show is really talking about the financial considerations you need to be thinking about when if you're currently an employee with a kind of a traditional career, but you're thinking you want to step out into the world of entrepreneurship, or whether you're doing it full time, meaning you literally leave your career to start a business, or like me, I still maintain my full time career, but I do a lot of entrepreneurial things outside the business. Another person who's been on this show, Jason, is Tara Jackson,
Okay.
who's coined the term dualpreneurship and wrote a book called The Dualpreneur Bible for those people who are deliberately maintaining full time careers and full time businesses. But the bottom line is, whatever way you're going to transition to entrepreneurship, there are financial considerations that need to be considered both before you make that leap, while you're making that leap, and even after you successfully transition. In your new book, The 7 Mindsets of Successfully Transitioning from Employee to Entrepreneur, addresses some of that. And by the way, full disclaimer, I'm one of the experts that Jason graced to allow me to contribute my experiences to the book. But talk to me about what was in your mind. I think this is your third book now.
Yes,
What was in your mind about why this particular book was necessary?
yes, Alfred. This book was necessary because my first book, Faith Plus Purpose Equal Legacy, that was geared towards encouraging our children to become entrepreneurs and showing the connection of fathers showing an example to their children or our children. That's the best way to help those children increase their leadership skills, character building skills, and for the father, it helped them to have potentially multiple streams of income. So we wanted to focus on that connection of entrepreneurship education, but more importantly, how can we strengthen our communities through entrepreneurship education and keeping more fathers in the household? But now, when I wrote the first book, I got feedback. And the feedback that I received from a lot of people was, I love that book. It was a great book, but I wanted more. I got to the end and I felt like it was just more to be said. And I took that feedback and I said, okay, I'm going to write another book as a follow up. So this was the mindset that I had, was just listening to my customer base, and also how can I get more comprehensive in giving people, not just or encouraging people to become entrepreneurs, but now what are the mindsets to successfully transition? Because as we know, entrepreneurship is not for everyone, but we have a lot of unhappy people who are working in their job, but it's not a fault of their own. Think about it. We've been more encouraged to go get a degree, go to school or a trade school, and work for someone else for the balance of our career, and then maybe get a pension. But we know that that is kind of broken in a lot of instances. So I wrote the book to just solve the problems that people may have or not really want to take that risk. Okay, well, here's the preparation to take that risk of becoming an entrepreneur.
You know, when you first told me that you were doing the book and you asked me would I agree to be one of the experts that you interviewed for the book, um, one of the reasons I said yes, in addition to me, being your friend and thinking very highly of you, is that we were coming out of the COVID shutdown, where a lot of people, either by choice because they finally decided, you know what, I'm going for my after this is over, I'm going for my dream. So you had a lot of new businesses that started because people was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I've waited long enough. This is my big sign that I should take the shot. And then there were others whose whole industries, their whole careers was shaken up,
Correct.
and they, whether the company got shut down or went out of business, and it was like I got to find a way to make money until my career, whatever that's going to be, resumes on the other side of this. So I thought the timing, not that there's ever a bad time to have this conversation, but in this case, there's a lot of people who either by choice or by necessity have to consider this possibility, this option of, whether I'm planning to do it forever and ever and ever, or I need to start this business to have another stream of income, even if my quote unquote job or career does come back. I don't want to be dependent on just one thing anymore. And so I just thought it was, great timing in terms of where people are. You put out a product that's meeting people where they are in terms of what this book is about. But I want to go through at least three different areas that I think people who are considering making this transition, and we again, I talk about some of it in the book, that I think when you're talking about financial wellness and maintaining your financial wellness through this transition, are just areas that people need to be thinking about. The first one, I think in my remarks in the book, I talk about how the biggest adjustment was for me was that when I had, when I was a full time professional, and a company like Black Enterprise, that even for its size is a very well
Mhm.
equipped, multi level skill sets company, I was used to having people take care of things
Right.
for me. There's an accounting department that takes care of the accounting. There's a admin that takes care of the admin stuff. There's an HR director that's making sure my health thing is right. I could just focus on just doing my job, and when I transitioned into this dualpreneur role, yeah, my work for Black Enterprise still had those resources. But if I wanted all that other stuff to happen in these other areas of my business, I had to either do it myself or find a cost effective way to do it, or it wouldn't get done. And I just think about even in the early part of this transition, the money that I lost because I didn't have the administrative support to follow through on certain things. Talk to me about how it's important for people who are thinking about that transition to think about the things they were used to getting from their career or their employer that now you kind of got to figure out a way to provide for yourself.
That's a great point, Alfred. And for me, uh, I was in the corporate world for a lot of years, a sales professional working with a lot of different industries. And I always had a quota, and I always had someone telling me, all right, this is what you need to meet if we're going to pay you. This is what you need to exceed if you want to get paid more. And this is where, if you don't do this, you're going to go on a performance improvement plan. So those were like the three areas that I was used to. Now, when you transition to becoming an entrepreneur, you don't have anyone telling you that. You don't have anyone telling you that, well, you have to meet a certain goal. You don't have anyone telling you that your profitability is going to be reached by you executing X amount of sales. So then the onus is on you, the entrepreneur, to see, well, how can I become profitable? What is it going to take for me to become profitable? And what do I have to do in terms of activity to reach a revenue generating profitable business? So all those factors have to play a part. Now, that's the end result. Then you have to figure out, well, what's the how to, as you mentioned. If you are used to someone filling up your calendar or someone scheduling your appointments, now that person is no longer there. You have to do it yourself. That's one part of the administrative part. Then you have to determine, okay, well, if I have a product versus I have a service, well, how do I fulfill the inventory for that product? Right? Who's going to tell you to do that? You don't have a boss to tell you to do that anymore. So you have to figure out inventory. You have to figure out the cost of the inventory, and then what is your break even point. So, as an entrepreneur, focusing on making that transition, you've got to really realize that, all right, I may start off as a sole proprietor, but if I want to scale my business, then I have to hire additional employees. But before I can get to that point, I've got to do all the things necessary by myself. or you can then trickle down or trickle up to begin adding, let's say, an executive assistant or adding a bookkeeper to manage the books. But in the beginning, it's all on you. So it's indicative of an individual to do that research first to know in advance all the things that you have to do on your own and what cost basis or what cost basis would it be to secure outside help to help you start the business. And as we
Right, and
know,
that outside help could be hiring someone outright, which for a
exactly,
lot of new entrepreneurs is probably not the first choice you want to do. It could be a freelancer, it could be a part timer, it could be there's a lot of online services that will do things for you virtually. But your point is, if it's only you, your two hands, in your head, you can't do but so much. The other thing that I learned is that we always heard that adage that time is money, and we again, when you're an employee, you think about time as money, meaning I get paid a certain amount of hour, and if I get a raise, I get paid a certain amount of more hour. Or if you're a salaried employee, then the time frame is not an hour; it's a year. I'm getting paid for my time every year. I'm going to get this much money. But when I again transition into in my case, dualpreneurship, or we'll say for the sake of the conversation, entrepreneurship, that's another thing that time is money, and you got to manage it. You like you say, you don't have somebody saying, okay, this is what time you got to be there. This is what time the meeting starts. This is what time, And I became very very conscious in the way that I hadn't been earlier in my career about making decisions about how I was going to spend my time. Because every hour that I didn't spend my time as wisely as I could have meant if not lost money, a lost opportunity to make money, which is the same thing.
correct.
It may not have
Absolutely.
cost me anything, but it cost me something because if I had used my time better. Whereas when you're used to a career, yeah, you got to be productive. You can't be totally just unproductive. But if you coast on Tuesday, nobody, but you get the work done by Friday, nobody's going to say anything.
Right.
But when you're an entrepreneur, it's like, nah, I got to be very judicious about what I'm going to do with my time.
Absolutely. And time is so critical. And having the energy to get up early, to begin your day, um, it's beneficial to work out before going to work. But do you always have the time to do that? Maybe, maybe not. But it's beneficial. At the same time, you want to always understand when is it prime time selling time or when is it time to take care of administrative work or when is it time for prospecting. So it's three different areas that you got to focus on as an entrepreneur. If you don't prospect, you don't take the time to prospect and continue to take the time to prospect, then your pipeline eventually will dry out because you have to think of it this way. When you're in business, you're continuing to market your products or services. The more prospective clients that you are able to achieve, the more your revenue increases. But if you are limited in your prospective clients and you only have existing clients, then you have to worry about referrals or adding on additional services or products to your existing client base. So it's indicative of an entrepreneur to really understand filling up your pipeline, filling up your
Mhm.
prospective pipeline is critical to your business success always. And it takes time to navigate when is the best time to do what. In certain
Well,
businesses, you have to have your clients on nights and weekends because maybe they're not available during the day, but you are.
I know what I eventually learned to do, but like I said, it took me time. Is I started breaking down my day into revenue generating activities or things that support revenue generating activities. And
Exactly.
then it wasn't on those two lists. If I could get to it, cool. But if I could, it didn't matter. And so for me, things that were supporting revenue generating activities, you and me, I get my workout in because I mean that for me that supports my ability to generate revenue. The
Right.
healthier and more alert I am, the more stamina that I have, the more business I can do, the more clients I can serve, if you will. So I counted that as a activity that supports revenue generation. relationships. I mean, people often
Mhm.
sacrifice their family for business, but in the long run, it doesn't pay off. Our the late Earl Graves, of course, we worked for his company, stressed his family relationships no matter how busy he got. So that
Absolutely.
might be doesn't directly generate revenue, but it supports revenue, your capacity to generate revenue. Now, one of the things that I enjoy, but I just stopped doing as much of, I don't mind. I like watching TV just like everybody else, but I can count on one. There's usually one series a year that I'll commit to. Like it'll be like it was The Good Doctor for these last few years. There's a lot of other great TV shows I have never seen. I ain't never going to see because I decided that doesn't fit those first two lists, either revenue generation or supports revenue generation. Therefore, there's going to be a lot of great, shows that I just never watched because that's not important enough. And I think it's important when people are making this transition to understand that those types of sacrifices have to be made because you have to look at everything as an investment. Talk to me, Jason, about, and I kind of want to put this kind of together, budgeting and forecasting. And the budgeting used to be when you got a career, you're primarily just budgeting for yourself and your family. But when you become an entrepreneur, you got a budget for the business. And those two things may be related, but they're not the same thing. But the other reason I wanted you to talk about forecasting, because you talk about this in the book, is when you got a regular paycheck and a regular schedule, forecasting is not quite important. As long as you maintain your gig, you kind of know, well, I know I'm going to get this much money. But forecasting both revenues, costs, and profits becomes extremely important when, like you said, it's on you to make those things happen. Talk about what you discovered along the way as you transitioned from being a sales professional working for a company versus, like you said, making your own money as an entrepreneur.
Great point and great question. And I would say this, I would address it this way, Alfred. And one of the things that I always used to tell people when I was a business banker, because before becoming an entrepreneur, I was a business banker with Citibank many years ago. And what entrepreneurs must not do is commingle your funds, meaning your
Mm.
personal funds versus your business funds. So you bring up a point. So you're going to budget differently for your personal finances. And then your business finances, that has a whole separate balance sheet, right? Now, when you're looking at your personal budgeting, you have to be real conscious of your discretionary income. Whereas when you're looking at a business owner or an entrepreneur, how do you balance your books? How do you forecast how many sales you're going to generate in a given month? Now you have to factor in, well, what does it cost to produce that product, or what does it cost to deliver that service? Now, the cost has to be minimum to maximize the profit. That's a basic skill set I learned in calculus for in college. Like minimize cost, maximize profit. But then you have to figure out, well, what is it going to take, or what level of activity do I need to meet a certain revenue stream to break even from my cost of doing business? And then it also ties into the prospecting. Well, how many prospects do I need to have that I need to convert to sales? And then what is the cost of me investing in prospecting? What is the cost of my time to get back and forth to a sales call? Or
Mm.
if it's virtually, which is a plus now, you don't have as much time for travel expenses, but there are going to be sometimes travel expenses. So all these factors play a role in your forecasting of the end result of the profitability of activity of sales and the cost of doing business.
Well, this other point I want to make, and I touched on it a little bit, but I want to go a little deeper because I already talked about our late founder Earl Grey's making family a priority, but you talked about it as well as your first book. Talking about you know teaching your kids the value of entrepreneurship, becoming an entrepreneur, and your leadership role as a father. I kind of want to get your take on this idea, and whether you're working for another company, you work for yourself. One of the revelations I got coming out of COVID was I don't want to just live to work. I want to work to live. I want to live well. I
Mm-hmm.
want to. and I know entrepreneurs who are almost slaves to their own business because they're not living. It's like, oh, it's just a chore, it's a burden, when it should be entrepreneurship is a pathway to build wealth and have a greater,
Hmm.
better lifestyle, not only for yourself or for your family. How important is it to kind of take into consideration the need? I'm gonna put it this way: the need to, especially if you're a father, especially if you're a member of a family, especially if you got children or you have a spouse, to, as you make this preparation, bring them along on the journey to do your best to get their buy-in. In other words, it may be hard to have that conversation your first couple of years in business when the vacation to Disney World you was able to go on every year because you had a guaranteed salary and a vacation. Now you're like, either we can't go on vacation because I don't have time, because like you said, the sales cycle is in my business is this period, or there's not enough extra profit right now to finance a vacation, so we may have to do a staycation or just go visit relatives down south. We're not going to be able to go to Disney World this year. And so I often look at entrepreneurs who struggle because the financial choices they have to make is not just impacting them, it's impacting their families. But it helps when the family is kind of brought in on the journey. If you can get it that way, it's not always possible in the first place. You've done a really great job, and I know this because I know your story of, across multiple generations, having people understand the choices that you've made in your career and how short-term sacrifice could lead to long-term benefits for them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, Alfred. And then, just to reiterate my journey, I spent a lot of time in corporate America, but I also, throughout my time in corporate America, I did have side businesses. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I had a role in teaching youth entrepreneurship. So, from the standpoint of my children, early on in life, when they were young adults and teenagers, they were being exposed to me from the dad's perspective of entrepreneurship makes sense. And I always remember telling my son, if you have the ability to earn your income versus having to get paid a salary, you'll never be unemployed. So that mindset was indoctrinated in my children early on. Now, when I became an entrepreneur on a full time basis, my children were primarily grown for the most part, but now they are having children and they're raising their families and they are now becoming entrepreneurs. And some of them have a full time job and have a side business. Some of them are entrepreneurs outright. And what they have been able to see me do is balance being a dad, being a husband, being a nonprofit organizational leader through National Sales Network or the Association of African American Financial Advisors, and yet understand that you can put forth the time and segment your time to do it all. But you have to prioritize what's most important to have the time to spend with your children or spend, in my case, with my grandchildren now. So I would say the best way to give advice to aspiring entrepreneurs is understand, what's your priority, what's your focus, and then having those hard conversations with your family that, all right, I'm doing this for you, I'm doing this for me, but I'm doing this for our legacy and our generation, that the knowledge that we're able to possess or the revenue we're able to possess as becoming business owners can now give us the lifestyle that we want to have to take those vacations, to go to Disney. Perfect example, one of my granddaughters, she's part of a cheering um, organization. So they compete and they go down to Disney to compete. As a matter of fact, they just came back. So that costs money. So their parents have to budget in that time to put forth that expense, but yet it's rearing an activity that's empowering my granddaughter to be a competitor. All right, you see how that all is?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
having that lifestyle and having that balance and having that understanding that you can have it all, but you got to plan for it. And as you plan and you put goals in place, you can facilitate the life that you want as an entrepreneur, as an employee, or as a family person that is generating, a comprehensive lifestyle.
you underscore one of the major themes of Your Money, Your Life and Black Enterprise, and you see, I think people come to a deeper understanding of the fact that real wealth is not money, though money is part of how we measure wealth. It's freedom, it's
Yes,
options.
yes,
No matter how you construct your work life, to know that, yeah, I can, I have time for my family, I have time to travel, I have multiple streams of income. So if the economy goes left, it might affect me in one way, but I got to be able to recover in the other way. That it's not even really about bank balances and credit scores. It's more about your ability to do things like, you know what, I'm going to go support my granddaughter as she's competing in Florida, or I'm going to set up. I was reading a section of the Bible. We think of the Sabbath as one day a week, but I think it was in Exodus when it says no, Sabbath is also 1 year every 7 years.
okay,
And I was
okay.
like, that's where the term sabbatical comes from. I was like, nah, man, that in the next 7 years, I'm
Mhm.
gonna do 6 years, and then I'm gonna take a year off. But again, once you make that decision,
Right,
you got to think about, okay, what are your plans? What are your priorities? What are you gonna do to make that happen? And the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship, or having an entrepreneurial mindset, whether you work for somebody else or not, is that you do think about what's priority. You
right,
do a better job of planning, because you don't think about, yeah, I'm just going to get my check and I'm good. It's more like, yeah, I'm getting my check and I'm good, but what else could I be doing? How should I be planning next year, the year after next? The other thing is that you really raise is important, especially to this show and Black Enterprise, is this idea that we're talking about wealth as multi generational. It's not just what you're doing in your own lifetime, but what your kids believe they can do in their lifetimes and your grandchildren.
yeah,
And I just think, I don't come from a background of entrepreneurs, but because my kids, and of course, at least my older kids, were raised in the Black enterprise
right,
environment, that's all they think. They think like entrepreneurs. Even if they
true,
have a regular job, they're like, nah. My oldest daughter Monique has never worked a traditional job, and has always had businesses. That's all she does.
okay,
Dad, I'm starting this. Dad, I'm making money doing that. And some of it is you know, the Jamaican heritage. Some of them in Jamaica having all kinds of jobs, but a lot of it is growing up in an environment, that I think we bless our kids when they grow up in an environment where they feel like, yeah, I can make a living as a professional, I can make a living as an entrepreneur, or I can do any combination and I don't have to choose. And you're
right,
right, I'm a little older than you, I think, but our generation was taught, nope, you get that career, you get that education, you get that skill, you get that career, and that's your option. And if you're starting a business, it's because you're either taking an unnecessary risk or you messed up in your job and you had to start a business.
right.
And I just think it's encouraging that we now have a couple of generations of young Black people in particular who don't look at it as an either or proposition. They like, yeah, I can do this or I can do that, or I can do both. And
And
I
I
think that's
bring that
what
up
you
in the
see in your
book.
children.
I bring that
Huh?
up in the book in terms
Yeah,
of you can become an entrepreneur, and if for whatever reason your business doesn't succeed or doesn't meet your expectations or whatever the scenario may be, if you got to go back to work, be it either temporarily
yeah,
or to supplement and build your savings back up until you can maybe start another business or restart your current business, that's okay. And it's not a matter of being an entrepreneur is the only option or being in a successful career is the only option. Both are good. It's a matter of doing and being the best you can be, which whatever situation best suits you. And sometimes I think people who may start as being an entrepreneur and maybe they may fail. Most businesses do fail, unfortunately. But if you fail, it's not a failure. You
right.
at least took the risk and you took the step of becoming an entrepreneur where most people haven't, but they wish they did. Okay, so again, I talk about that in the book. Like, if you got to go back to work, that's okay. It's whatever situation fits you and your family the best. Do what's in your best interest of you and your family.
So, man, you make such a strong point, Jason, about this idea that it's not an either or scenario. And the truth is, then most of our careers, we're going to be making one choice or another. The days of just getting a job and holding on to it for 50 years, those days are long gone. So the capacity to choose either path, depending on what your lifestyle needs are, what your goals are as you go from chapter to chapter in your life, is just very, very valuable. It's really what financial wealth and financial wellness is all about. Listen, before I let you go, it's just a powerful conversation. What is the best way for the Your Money, Your Life audience to keep up with what you're doing? Obviously, order the book, and just obviously these conversations need to continue. I know you speak around the country doing, talking on these topics, and you're still out, promoting your book. But what's the best way for the Your Money, Your Life audience to stay in touch with what you're doing?
Certainly. So my website is jasonsmurray.com. That's jasonsmurray.com. And you want to send me an email, info@jasonsmurray.com. And through social media, my social media handles are Jason Murray CEO. My book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of the major outlets. But through my website, you can get an autographed copy at jasonsmurray.com. Um, that's the best way if you want an autograph copy or attend some of the events that I'm speaking at. I'm going to be speaking at an event in Piscataway this weekend coming up, and then in Keene University for a fatherhood organization in June at their annual conference.
Listen, Jason, it's always a great pleasure. Like I said, we just having the same conversation we have anyway, but with an audience. But thank you for being my guest on Your Money, Your Life.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Well, we did it again, starting another new season of Your Money, Your Life, and we're glad you're here with us. Thank you for joining us. This is Alfred Edmond Jr., Executive Editor and Senior Vice President at Black Enterprise. We'll see you next time. Take care.